Hello, welcome to Butch's Building Blocks. I'm Butch. Today we're going to start a brand new cutting board project. This time we're going to make an Octagon cutting board. Now I've never seen an Octagon cutting board, not even on YouTube. But I figured out how to make an Octagon easy enough so that we can make our end grain cutting board. We're going to start out with black walnut, nice slab of maple, and some padauk to add some color to it. This is the first time I've ever made this type of a cutting board, so any mistakes that I make, I'll let you see them and tell you how to correct them. All right, let's get going. The first part of our project is to find ourselves a scrap piece of pine or some other piece of wood that you don't really care about that's going to be used to make our Octagon blank, which we're going to use to set our saw blade so that we can cut our maple to the correct size. So I'm going to take both of these. These stocks are about 2 inches. I'm going to plane them down to 1 7/8 before we cut them into the correct size strip. Here's my blank pine square, 1 7/8 inches on both sides. From this, we are going to make a simple octagon. It won't take much effort at all. Easy for anybody to do. Now, here's my octagon. We are going to be cutting this surface here. This is a 45-degree angle. It's not 45 degrees from center, it's offset, which depending on the size of your wood makes all kinds of differences, but I'll show you an easy way to do it in which this angle will be exactly where you want it to be, whether you use 1-inch stock, 2-inch stock, or anything. When making an octagon, the very first thing we have to do is set our blade to a 45-degree angle. That's what the flat cut is that we need. Now, in order to get it so that it is at the right point, take your block of square wood, lay it on the saw blade. Be careful to not lay it on too many teeth. Then bring your fence until it touches, lock yours in place, and now we are ready to make our cuts. Now that we have our fence set, we are going to take our block and run it through. We're going to cut each of these 4 sides off, and then we'll end up with a perfect octagon. Let's take a look. That is pretty darn good. We have ourselves a very nice octagon. Now that we have our octagon, we only need half of this. Okay? So we need to cut this in half, but you have to remember the thickness of your saw blade. So find the halfway mark and then move it 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch. It depends on your saw blade width. Whatever the kerf is, you have to adjust for that. So you end up with truly a half an octagon, and then this other portion will be somewhat less than a half. Okay, I found the center of my octagon. When I line up my blade, I will make sure that my blade cuts to this side of the line so that I end up with a true half of my octagon showing over here. As you can see, I have split it. This is the full-size piece. This is the chunk that is slightly off. Okay. You can see the difference there. It is exactly a blade's width. So this side is too short. We don't need that. You need to keep the side that is exactly half of the octagon. And I'll tell you why here in a moment. We just got done cutting our octagon in half. That fits perfectly in there. We need to make half octagons so that we can match up the two end pieces to make a full octagon. We now have our slab of maple. We need to cut 7 strips at exactly that dimension so that we can make octagon halves out of these pieces here. Now we have to make half an octagon out of those. This is where your blank comes in very, very handy. Pull your fence back, readjust your blade so that it's at a 45-degree angle. Then take your blank, lay it up against your saw blade, and bring your rest into place. Now, you have the same angle here. You have the same width, which is 1/2 the distance of these other 2 flats. Now we can run our solid stock through, cut one side, run the solid stock through, cut another side, and we should end up with a perfect piece of wood, half of our octagon. All my pieces, word of caution. By the way, the power is completely off to the saw, so there's no danger of my losing my fingers here. As you're running this through the saw blade, this very thin strip gets chopped off. As it finishes cutting, that thin strip is left dangling very, very close to the saw blade. I had 2 pieces kick back on me as that blade pulled in and then it shot back out. So stand off to the side, or maybe you have a better solution, but be careful when you finish cutting it, the piece doesn't kick back and get you. I finished cutting all the pieces, as I said. Here are the 2 halves that fit together to give us our beautiful octagon shape, which is going to be what shows up on our end grain cutting board. All right, we have cut our octagon pieces, and now we need to fill this in with a triangle cut at a 45-degree angle so that it will fit right on top of there. Now, this time you're going to need some calipers or something to get a fairly accurate measurement. This flat here is 0.51 hundredths of an inch, 51 hundredths of an inch. Now, I did some experimenting, I'll have to admit. I did a couple cuts first of all. I have found that this triangle needs to be slightly oversized in order for it to fit. Otherwise, it's too low and you'd have to plane these down and it would change your angle. So, my stock dimension across here is 0.55 inches or 55 hundredths of an inch. That's what we're going to cut. Here is my wood stock. I planed it down to 55 hundredths of an inch thick, which is just a little over half an inch. Now, I did use my wood scribe, but in order for you to see the angle, I highlighted it in pencil. I've already set my fence and my saw blade because going off of this pencil line would be too thick and it wouldn't work. So let's go ahead and make this cut. Here's our triangular cut. Word to the wise, a mistake that I have made before is when cutting off small triangular pieces, it comes off this chunk of wood before the saw blade completely finishes that cut. And so you need to cut that off so that it does not interfere with your glue up. The second cut, after you've made this first 45-degree angle, the second cut is just a vertical cut right here. You can see that line, and that will give us our second of the two angles that we need. And here's our second triangular cut. Which will go nicely onto the other side. Making these two triangular cuts will be time consuming. You need to adjust your saw blade between 45 and 90 degrees every other cut. And in our case, we need to have 12 of these strips. This is the Octagon, the halves point. There's a piece of black walnut, here's a piece of black walnut. And I found out through trial and error that the downward pressure is more important than the sideways pressure. So as you can see, I have several clamps pushing down and then several other of them pulling sideways. These are our 1/4-inch strips of Padauk that will get glued on to both sides, just like this. You can see we have the Padauk in between each piece. Have parallel clamps, I highly recommend them. They come in extremely handy. All glued. As you can see, I also have a 2-inch piece of hickory, which I've clamped through the middle, and this will help keep that bow out of it. Even though parallel clamps should theoretically keep it from bowing, I like a little extra insurance. Our cutting board, even before we get to our Octagon pattern, looks phenomenal. The color scheme is very good. I've cleaned it up, planed it down so that both sides are nice and smooth. And now we are ready to cut our 1-inch strips off of this so that we can build our hexagons. This is what our pattern looks like. It's not glued up, obviously, but just to start with, I think it looks magnificent. For my glue ups, I use the Titebond 3. Supposedly, it's a little bit better as a food grade glue. Although if you read the instructions very carefully on the label, it does not say that. Octagon cutting board has come out magnificently so far. I have attached 2 pieces of sacrificed pine so that I can run this through my planer. Without these 2 pieces, when those blades came across here, it would chip our end and make a mess. But this will protect it so that we can run it through the planer. After sanding to 320 grit, it's time to put on our oil. For this application, I'm using Walrus cutting board oil. Let's see what our board looks like. Look at that dark black walnut color just pop right out after it gets some oil on it. The Padauk will turn a deeper shade of orange after the oil soaks into the wood. There it is. Magnificent. It looks very, very good. We'll let this oil soak in for several hours. We'll buff off the excess and then reapply to the other side. Our Octagon cutting board project is finished. As you can see, it has turned out very nicely. The black walnut diamonds, Padauk, and maple. The only thing I would do different the next time is that I would put another colored wood in between each of these to accentuate the Octagon cutting board pattern. This has been a wonderful project. It required me to do some math in order to figure out how to cut it. I hope I've given you enough instructions that if you want to build this Octagon cutting board, you certainly can. If you like what you've seen, give me a thumbs up. If you wish to have any of my products built for you, please go to butchesbuildingblocks.com and I'll get you whatever you need.